Ooh. Hello, everyone who is waiting backstage. Boon Factor. So excited. So am I. Let's go. Late night stream. Not our usual time, but I was trying to. So, story. Carlos and I are basically Amish, technologically illiterate. So I got this for Christmas from a family member. It's an Elgato Stream Deck, and honestly, Elgato makes a lot of streaming stuff. In my experience, it's been a little overhyped, but this is pretty cool. It's like buttons, hotkeys with an LED screen, and it's cool. Like I can just push a button and go like right to a reaction, so that's convenient. And I figured that out. But like, I spent like an hour today, and I've done this multiple times with multiple plugins. I spent like an hour today trying to get Spotify set up for the like Stream Deck so I could quickly play songs and stuff, and could not figure it out. It's extremely complicated, so. But it's still cool. Must be a Midwest thing to be tech illiterate, definitely. I think if I set up the Stream Deck right, I should have just sent a tweet. All right, let's see, actually. Let's see if I sent this tweet. This is the moment of truth. It's not what I want. Where's the Twitter? Tweeter app. Did I send a tweet like I tried to set it up to do? Let's hold on. I gotta show you all my screen. The answer is yes. Except the answer is yes, except it gave a link to Midwestern University. So I didn't mean to do that. But Matthews Midwestern. All right. So I'll have to change that, but we got it to work. Change that right now. All right, we're becoming more technologically literate, everyone, day by day. It is what it is. Okay. Yo, hello. Redguard 9. Oh, what's up, man? Ramiro, what's up, comrade? Eddie and Midwestern Marks comrades. What's up, Ramiro? Not much. I just wanted to hop on stream and react to some stuff and talk to some people in the chat and hang out for a little bit because I wasn't doing much. Yesterday's stream was fire. Thank you. Yeah, everyone should check out we'll upload it on our YouTube soon, but go watch the stream we did with Ramiro for his show on masking imperialism. It was really fun. Talked about China, talked about various things. So, all right, let's try this again. I'm going to try and do another operation with my Stream Deck here. All right, ready? We're going to try and make another tweet. Wait, did that work? Or no, I tried to say something in the chat. Oh, it worked. All right, that's cool. Let's try it on YouTube. Did that one work? Yeah. All right, we're technologically literate in here. Let's go. Let's go. All right, so now we can make tweets. And we can put stuff in the chat at the click of a button. And we can do this. All right, so I did make some progress on the Stream Deck today. Sweet. Shout out to my mom for giving me that for Christmas. Her gift to the revolution. Hey, I just found this channel and I love it. Awesome. Glad you love it, Ben. What's your favorite kind of video on this channel? Because I've been doing some things lately, like looking at our analytics and seeing what kind of video people like most. And, obviously I have that a little bit figured out on TikTok by now. What kind of video is going to go viral versus what, whatever else. But, yeah, trying to figure that out on YouTube too, what our audience wants to see. Jacob says, hey, Eddie, video from Ryan Chapman. If you remember that guy, he thinks wokeism. Yeah, I remember him. He does an in-depth explanation of socialism, and it's a little long, but I reckon that it's bad, and he'll give a liberal take on it. Yeah, I can watch it and see if it's worth it. Yeah. Usually, though, like in our Discord, we have a place where people can suggest things for us to react to, and like a lot of them lately have been really long. Like people are sending me like hour-long movies, and that's fine. I don't mind that. Long content's good. Just understand it's probably going to take me longer to get to it, or it's less likely, that I'm going to choose that video versus something that's like 3-4 minutes condensed and makes for a good reaction. Or even something like infographics that's like 15 to 20 minutes long and makes for a good series of reaction videos. But, I mean, you can still send me that stuff. There's definitely a chance that I'll look at it. And I will definitely look at the Ryan Chapman one because the last video of his we reacted to was interesting. Manny, good to see you, man. You too, Manny. What's up? What's up? Eddie, have you seen the Polistrum live stream? No, I have. I mean, I've seen it. I haven't gotten a chance to watch it yet. I was working on some stuff this week, and I just had too much going on. I might be able to watch it tomorrow. In between doing my homework, I have a lot of stuff to get done tomorrow for grad school, but there's a chance I check out the Polistrum video. There's a chance that I also don't want to watch it tomorrow because my brain is fried from studying healthcare administration, but that's a game time decision. Do you F with Bad Bunny? Have you seen his most recent music video where he highlights the neoliberal policies on the island that affect the native population of Puerto Rico? I have not seen that, but that's interesting. I've heard of him. I've heard of the artist. Someone I was looking at today that I wanted to make a TikTok about, I didn't get a chance to, is y'all are gonna see my suggested videos. What was his name? It was Gais Gaddafi. Oops, not Gaddafi, Guevara. I guess we gotta look at brutal pictures of Muammar Gaddafi. I spelled his name terrible. Gais Guevara. This guy has songs like F the Nordic Model is one of his most famous songs. His first album, I don't know if it was his first album, but one of his EPs was Black Bolshevik. So he's basically a tanky. Big fan after just finding this guy today already. So yeah, if you're looking for some revolutionary music, check this guy out. This is F the Nordic Model off his Black Bolshevik EP. So yeah, good stuff. If you like JPEG Mafia, you like this guy. But JPEG Mafia, they're anarcho-communists as far as I know. Versus Black Bolshevik and F the Nordic Model implies this guy's more of a tanky anti-imperialist. So good stuff. Good stuff, huh? Plus, I mean, the name Guevara. I'm assuming his, real name probably isn't Gais Guevara. He probably chose Guevara after Che. I don't know. I haven't seen that anywhere, but you gotta assume, right? Nico House is all about Bad Bunny. I never watched Nico House's show, but he makes a lot of people mad who also like hate me and just call people tankies and stuff. So, maybe that means he's good. Midwestern Marx has republished one of my articles before. Do y'all have any topics or subjects that are looking for to be written about? Oh, nice. If you're asking the chat, I'm sure people can let you know. I was asking earlier what kind of videos people want to see. But at Midwestern Marx, we like anything that recaptures the history of like American socialists and American revolutionaries in the past is always going to be high on the priority list, because these are like the founding principles of our project. Anything that gives like a dialectical materialist analysis of the history of labor and labor struggles and stuff in the Midwest or in the U.S. is going to be something we like. Anything about imperialism and the history of U.S. imperialism and tying that into capitalism, and the big banks and the traditional finance capitalists and oligarchs in the U.S. Anything like that is generally pretty well received, but we also like to publish things that are unique. We published an article once about a Marxist analysis of space capitalism. Like if humans have the capacity to start colonizing planets in space before we have socialism, what that'll look like. And then I watched a video after we published that article. I reacted to a video of like Star Trek, basically being a socialist society. So yeah. I've been looking into a brief history of the socialist movement in my state, Ohio, so I'll probably swing by y'all as I get further along. Perfect. It's exactly what I'm talking about. That's pretty sick. It was sick. Hey Eddie, what are some books for someone less informed? Me to start learning about Marxism, communism. Why Marx Was Right by Terry Eagleton is one I hear a lot. I don't love that book. I read it like after I had already read some Marx, I guess, so I'm probably biased in a bad way. But I know it's good. I think Engels's Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State, which was very, very popular even compared to other Marxist texts when it came out. It's an anthropology book, basically, but I think that's a good one. I really do, because that basically takes a Marxist analysis to things like the family form, looking at how the form of the family has changed over the years in relation to how production has changed, things like that. So it really shows you how dialectical materialism works, and why it's useful for analyzing history, and what Marx and Engels are really getting at with, like, analyzing historical development over time, and how production changes different things. What was I gonna say? Someone just liked the stream on Facebook. Thank you. So make sure to like and or share the stream, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. Help us out. Really appreciate that. Helps boost us in the algorithm if you like the stream. Helps us defeat those Silicon Valley oligarchs who want to suppress good old-fashioned Marxist theory and advanced Marxist theory, modern day theory. What up, bro? Hello. Eddie, you gotta watch Sorry to Bother You, bro. I know. I can't believe I haven't watched it yet. It's crazy. What are your opinion on BRICS as more countries want to join? Good question. I love BRICS. Have people seen that Giannis Varoufakis video of him talking about trade in China? Giannis Varoufakis is a Greek economist. Yeah, basically all you need to know about BRICS is not all you need to know, but the interest rates on the developmental loans that China is giving countries are about 4%, which is exactly or close to what the interest rates were for the European countries who the U.S. was helping to build up after World War II with the Marshall Plan. And if you look at a country like Sri Lanka, which recently had a crisis, economic crisis and political crisis, largely stemming from their national debt, China was accused of debt trapping them, and Ben Norton did a write-up. We covered it a couple times on this show. 86% of their debt or something is owed to Western banks or U.S. banks. Sri Lanka's debt versus about 10% of it was owed to China. And if countries have started to accumulate a lot of debt with China, they tend to cancel it. They recently canceled a ton of debt for African countries who they've given developmental loans to. Recently, I did an article for Midwestern Marks that hopefully people check out about Bill Gates and what he's been doing with his philanthropy, his so-called charitable donations. And actually, I'll pull that up, but in Africa, and he's really been giving credits, so bank loans to African farmers, small African farmers, so they can purchase agricultural equipment from Western multinationals that Bill Gates has shares in. But the interest rates on these loans that Bill Gates is giving the African farmers is really high. And the fertilizer, the Western fertilizer, has been found to poison the African soil. And there was recently a summit held in Rwanda where a bunch of African policy experts, and actually not just African policy experts, but policy experts and agricultural experts from all around the globe came together and called for these investors, led up by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to stop debt trapping African farmers and poisoning the African soil, just to make a buck via the sale of agricultural equipment. This AGRA initiative promised to develop agricultural infrastructure, the infrastructure that would allow Africa to become food sovereign and to feed their people. And, what it's done is allow starvation to continue, malnutrition and poverty to continue, debt to increase on a large scale among the small farmers, small and medium farmers. Western multinationals have made massive profits, and the soil has become poisoned, and there's there's more inequality now. And then during COVID and now the war in Ukraine, causing supply shortages, the malnutrition rates and poverty rates and things like this have been getting worse year to year in Africa. So China, offering BRICS, offering these developmental loans, is intended to be a way out, an escape from the debt trap set up by Bill Gates and his cronies. Excuse me, another American oligarchs. And this is a good video if you are curious about the claims of China debt trapping, because Yanis Varoufakis is a social democrat, right? He's someone who criticizes China and says he doesn't support them for being authoritarian. But here he debunks a lot of the accusations of imperialism against China. So we can actually watch this. This is worth watching. It'll make a good reaction video.
We have transferred so much money from our economy.
Let me know how the volume is. Can you hear? Can you not hear? Do you need a beer? Just let me know.
Over to China by buying all those things and supporting their economy over there so they could make more and more money. They are now all over Africa, buying things and investing over there and getting those countries dependent on them and supporting, non-democratic people. And I'm just
like whom?
Well,
we are in a country that supports Saudi Arabia.
Yes, that's true. Right. So
suddenly we have a problem with, superpowers supporting non-democratic people.
This lady's internalized the language of the empire, in which democratic just means nothing. Even that he brings up Saudi Arabia, the monarchy, great point. But the U.S., 93% of our elections are determined by the candidate who raises the most money. Our media apparatuses, our communication apparatuses, the most important productive industries in the country, the banks, the financial apparatuses are all in the hands of a small class of people who use that wealth to not only control the elections, but lobby for various bills to be passed, influence politics by influencing the media, putting out propaganda. But then, the U.S. is allowed to invade countries and kill millions of people because they're undemocratic. That's our reasoning. As we support and give tons of money to Saudi Arabia, a monarchy. So, the word democracy means nothing within a liberal democracy controlled by financial capitalists and oligarchs.
Yes, yes, I do, but I also am just concerned that we've sort of created the economic power that China sort of has now, and they're using it, I fear, going to be using it against us eventually and against the better interests of a lot of people.
Allow me to put your mind to rest.
Okay, great.
You shouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
Listen. And let me explain why you shouldn't worry about it. But please continue.
Well, they're they're in Africa. They're lending money to countries to build ports and different infrastructure.
To build what?
Port.
And what's wrong with that?
And because
countries that need ports get ports.
But they're making people dependent on. I know it's the same thing that we've done, which is
no, it's
horrible
not.
Around the world.
They are far more humanistic than the United States ever was.
Really? Okay,
absolutely.
Great. So
let me give you an example. Of course, they are peddling for.
You see, the arrogance. China has basically become the productive base for the entire world. Every product you have in the U.S. is made in China, and she's like, "We made them rich. We in the U.S. made them rich. How? Because they allowed some of our companies to invest there, and we allowed them we didn't sanction them and starve them off from global markets like we've done to every other socialist country. The U.S. has been involved in China's creation of wealth, as have a lot of countries via their trade policies of mutual development and the special financial zones of private development that they've allowed in their country. But, that's still things that have been created by Chinese labor, right? That's still Western companies making all that money and profit off of Chinese labor. They've still built up what they have today. They're an extremely wealthy country by themselves. It wasn't that the U.S. made them rich, and now it's just like, oh, we've created a monster. China just allowed Western multinationals to make money off of their people and off of their labor, which basically tricked the U.S. into not trying to destroy them for about 20 years. That's interesting. And that, just the lack of and this is, the experience I have when I talk to almost anybody about China in real life. The lack of real examples or real understanding of the accusations you're even making. They're in Africa. He said they're in Africa. Like, doing what? Have you studied their trade policies extensively? Or did you just hear Rachel Maddow or whoever else on CNN or MSNBC say China is a dictatorship, they're imperialist, they're debt trapping in Africa? And then she says it's the same thing we've done, which Yanis Varoufakis corrects her, as he should. Says, no, it's not. It's absolutely not the same thing the U.S. has done. In fact, it's a counter to what the U.S. has done. It's because China understands the dominance of global finance capital and the way that that's used for imperialist ends. So they're trying to offer countries a way out and trying to help countries develop, because what the U.S. does with sanctions promotes economic backwardness, right? Prevents countries from developing. and with the U.S. exporting capital there, and with Western multinationals being allowed to make money off these countries they colonize, the surplus of that country created by those people's labor is leaving the country for the most part. So it's not being reinvested in productive development. So there's a need for countries in the global south to industrialize and increase their productive forces.
Influence.
Yeah.
But they are non-interventionist, absolutely non-interventionist in a way that Europeans, the West, has never managed to fathom.
But I have a feeling they have a longer term thought process that is more interventionist.
But
anyway,
let's judge what we see. Let's judge what.
Okay.
Well, let's start at the beginning. The Chinese never asked Apple to go to Shenzhen and produce all the iPhones. It was Steve Jobs that decided that. Yeah? It was not China that went to Washington, D.C. and demanded that they buy a third of your national debt. If they hadn't bought it, you would be in serious trouble. Okay. Number three, I did allude to this in my talk. If in 2008 China had not cranked up their credit bubble, you would be in a new Great Depression now. So, China, the United States, and the European Union are absolutely synergistic, and they need one another in a way that if we fail to acknowledge and to nurture, billions of people, including the majority of the people in this country, are going to suffer. Now,
that's really interesting, as the U.S. has ramped up sanctions and hostility against China since this time. I don't know when this was. Let's see. This was in 2020. So just as the U.S. was really, launching into their new Cold War policy against Russia and China. And of course, now you have the proxy war being waged against Russia, which has been terrible for the European Union and terrible for European countries. The sanctions have backfired. Inflation and the price of goods has skyrocketed. And people are suffering, just like you said, because at this point, the East and the West are, inextricably economically intertwined. Like a lot of European countries are getting 50% of their energy plus from Russia. And then the US, all of a sudden wants to start this new Cold War. And, there's these European countries are being expected to just shut all this down and get their energy from elsewhere. And the US is doing ridiculous things like lifting a few of their sanctions off Venezuela, saying, yeah, we're still going to starve you guys. We're still going to keep these sanctions on you that have decreased government revenue 99%. But we're going to release a few so you can sell us oil, and then we can sanction Russia, who's one of Venezuela's biggest trading partners. And Venezuela, for the most part, has been like, screw off. But it's just absurd. The belligerence of the imperialists to try and, cut off Russia and China at this point. The millions of people, working people who suffer, be damned.
I am not going to stand here and defend China and the Chinese Communist Party. I already made some negative remarks about the Chinese Communist Party in referring to, their attitudes as being compatible with those of Wolfgang Schäuble. My concern about China is the authoritarian manner in which the Chinese regime is treating the Chinese people. As a Democrat, I have a problem with this. Mind you, I have to tell you that, from my understanding of China, it's a very interesting social experiment, in the sense that at the local...
I said the word democracy means nothing in the West. I guess Yanis Varoufakis has internalized that idea. He's internalized the Western liberal idea of democracy, where, everyone who looks like us is democratic and everyone in the East isn't. Even though a third party nonpartisan study was done recently where people find that they're asking people if they think their government is democratic or not. And the US was something like below 30%, and China was well above 60%. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they were one of the top countries in the world where people feel that their government actually listens to them and they have control of it. But, they're the authoritarians.
level, the regional level, you now have a boisterous democracy at the local and regional level, even with popular success stories in overthrowing local authorities, local bureaucrats who have been corrupt, who have been this, who have been that, who have been the other. When it comes to the influence of China outside its borders, I have to say, firstly, it's quite remarkable that they don't seem to have any military ambitions. Secondly, Africa. I'll give you an example, a specific example, Ethiopia. 2004, because it happened to be there, and I have some first-hand experience of it. They went into Ethiopia. I'll tell you why they went into Ethiopia, because they suspected there was oil. Because China is a major industrial power, but it lacks primary resources. Now, instead of going into Africa with troops, colonially, destroying the country, killing people like the West has done for the last 100 years, what they did was they went to Addis Ababa and they said to the government, we would like, we can see you have problems with your infrastructure. We would like to build some new airports, upgrade your railway system, create a telephone system, and rebuild your roads. And we'll do this all for free. No strings attached. We don't want anything from you. And they did. Why did they do it? Because it's soft power. Because because they knew that if oil is discovered, and it was discovered later, then, of course, the Ethiopian government will be much more open to Chinese oil companies coming there. They have never combined their investment with imperialistic,
What a concept. You trade with countries, you get them to like you through being friendly and helping them develop their economy. And then if they find oil, they'll let you have some. They'll let you, help or make money off of it. Versus the U.S., the U.S. strategy of just taking all the oil and drone striking anybody who tries to take it from them. This is from Nick Terse, who's done a lot of really good work deconstructing the military-industrial complex. He has a really good book called The Complex, I believe. There's also another good book about this specifically, about U.S. drone warfare, called The Assassination Complex, put out by people from The Intercept, including Jeremy Scahill. But this is about AFRICOM, which is the U.S.'s drone warfare system and system of military bases in Africa that maintains 40 plus bases, which allow for drone strikes to be operated and carried out. Of course, under the Obama administration, when a lot of these documents were released, we found that there were various drone strike operations in Africa where 90% of the people killed weren't the intended target. So it's 90% civilian casualty rate. And, we don't even know all the drone strikes that are carried out. A lot of these things are hidden or done covertly or done off the books. So that's just what we know. So that's the U.S. strategy. You can see it covers basically every country in Africa. The U.S. is crawling, and China has none of these, right? China doesn't have foreign military bases like this. They have embassies. They've sent troops on various occasions to do various peacekeeping missions, usually, when the U.S. is funding some extremists to try and cause a coup. But China doesn't have any foreign military bases like this, versus the U.S. is covering the continent of Africa, and recently destroyed Libya, where there's now an open-air slave market and countries are fighting in the power vacuum that was left after the overthrow of Gaddafi, because he wanted to create an African central bank for developmental loans for these countries. But NATO killed him. So now China is doing the BRICS initiative and other things, helping Africa develop. And no wonder they want to trade more with Africa and want to trade more with China. And they are more open to having their resources and labor go to help China rather than the West. The West is literally still occupying them. Literally.
when I was Minister of Finance, I had a very interesting experience with Costco, one of the Chinese national companies that in the end bought the port of Piraeus. When I moved into the ministry, I found a contract from the previous government that they had already sold the port of Piraeus for a pittance and other ridiculous conditions to the Chinese, under the guidance, of course, of the European Union and the International Monetary Fund as well. And in other words, as the minister, I was bound to a particular deal that was terrible for Greece. And I went to the Chinese and discussed it with them. And I was really astonished. I said to them, look, you're paying too little. You're not committing to a sufficient level of investment. And you are treating our workers as fodder. You're effectively subcontracting labor to horrible companies that exploit the workers. And I can't deal with this. And effectively, I proposed to them to renegotiate the contract. So instead of getting 67% of the shares of the port, they would get with the same price, 51. The remaining shares would go into the Greek pension fund system in order to bolster the capitalization of the public pensions. Secondly, I want you to commit to 180 million euros of investment within 12 months. And thirdly, proper collective bargaining with the trade unions and no subcontracting of labor. And to my astonishment, they said, okay. Can you imagine if that was a German company or an American company? That's why I'm saying I don't think you should worry.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, think about the extent that people like Elon Musk has gone to bust up unions at his company, or even not productive, or I mean, like service industry jobs like Starbucks or Amazon, or even the UFC is one I notice a lot. The extent that they go to prevent their workers from having collective bargaining rights. Or if you think about what happened to the teachers in Wisconsin in 2012 with Scott Walker, fueled by a bunch of money from the Koch brothers. These corporations and capitalists and CEOs are willing to go to any measure to bust up unions. And then Giannis Fairfax is just like, hey, these companies are exploitative. You know, you're subcontracting labor to exploitative companies, allow them to collectively bargain, form a union, and then, you know, allow a certain percentage of this money to go into productive development for Greece and, you know, pension funds for the workers. The Chinese officials are like, yep. Like, if you propose that to Elon Musk, he would laugh you out of the room. Union. That's a good one. I created all this wealth. The only one who can collectively bargain is me. Elon Musk. These workers don't know anything. I could create everything without them. I'm literally Tony Stark. Ooh, Costco is not a Chinese company. What is this guy talking about? I think he was talking about when he was the Greek finance minister and they had a developmental deal with China. And you know, Costco was one of the companies involved, I think, unless there's a different Greek Costco, other than the grocery store that we're thinking of. Uh-oh, y'all. All right, I got to go to the bathroom. I'm going to pull something up, though. I'll pull something up good. Something real good. We're going to have our first intermission. It's going to be good. Sorry, I'm spaced out. All right, there you go. This is a short one. Here's me wrestling some guy this is a D1 guy, I think, from North Carolina.
King is back like prodigal. I gave him time, it's been too long. Was silent.
Did I win? Oh, that's the match that cuts off early. Or did it not load at all? Whoops. It didn't load? What the heck? Oh, well. Sorry, y'all. No watching me wrestle today. Move to China? Okay, I freaking will. Buffering sucks. It does. Sorry, you all had to watch buffering for like 3 minutes while I pee. All right, I kind of want to watch this. It's about the end of the Soviet Union during the collapse. Basically about how it wasn't good, I think. Someone sent this. I skipped to the part where he's talking about shock therapy, which is a term popularized by Naomi Klein in her book, The Shock Doctrine. Basically talking about how these countries who get cooed by the U.S. and go from either socialist or, countries with a lot of nationalized industry and banks into neoliberal countries with free markets, basically free for Western multinationals to exploit, and the bourgeoisie of the home country, it leads to disaster for the people economically, large levels of unemployment, low levels of healthcare access, high levels of homelessness, malnutrition, poverty, stuff like this. So people in the U.S. recognize that trickle-down economics sucks, and the U.K. After 40 years of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And people in the global South or Latin America at least recognize it too, because they've had, and in the East, this is more about the East. I was thinking about Naomi Klein's book, Shock Doctrine, which talks a lot about former Soviet countries and Latin America. But a lot of these countries recognize as well that capitalism, trickle-down economics is not the answer. It leads to disaster for the people.
Boyo, this specimen, due to move Russia out of this tumultuous era. Russia's transition to capitalism was a messy saga and really sets the tone for the country we know today. TLDW. It was a shit show. You could imagine that transforming a country that spent decades focused on collective ownership and managed itself through a command economy would have a hard time moving towards a capitalist one. Firms which originally focused on inefficient and meaningless things like production targets and maintaining the health and well-being of their employees now had to shift to the things that really matter. The only unambiguously moral good thing, maximizing shareholder value. And people who had to do this change were a generation of leaders who never had to do that. And furthermore, vilified that impulse. Because it's an evil one. Russia would undergo privatization under the hot, sexy new global ideology of neoliberalism, and following Poland's movement out of communism, would use a harsh and controversial economic plan called shock therapy, which was as pleasant as it sounds. Neoliberalism is... One second. No. There's nothing in the player's handbook at all about neoliberalism. Maybe it's a spell? Neo, it's M-N, Mordenkainen's non-detection, or nope, not in there. It's a term used to describe the 20th century resurgence of 19th century ideas of laissez-faire capitalism. It's essentially a dogmatic faith in the infallibility and inviolability of the great invisible hand of the free market.
I love when people call it a dogmatic faith, because that's literally what it is. And I had one of these, Milton Friedmanite trickle-down economics professors when I was in college, and took their class and tried to learn their ideology as best I could. And it is literally a dogmatic faith. It is a belief where you work backwards from your conclusion and you try and make the real world fit into this idea that the invisible hand of the market is all-knowing, and any of the problems we see today are all due to the government. And if we just got rid of the government, things would be better. Ignore the fact that corporations who have accumulated capital and wealth for years and years and years are the ones who control the government. It's all the government's fault. That's why capitalism isn't perfect today, but even still, it's the best system by far. Just let the market work out. That's how everything works best. And you'd say, What about when this led to, what about the countries who underwent shock therapy and went from socialism to neoliberalism and saw all these high levels of poverty, unemployment, malnutrition, things like this? And they'll say, oh, those countries, they just had too big of governments, but actually their economies were really good because they made tons and tons of money for Western multinational corporations. So that's the sign of a good economy, right?
You might recognize it from the early COVID pandemic, where the line had to go up no matter how many people must suffer and die for it. In the 20th century, there was a move to a form of Keynesian economics after the Great Depression. This meant that the...
And speaking of the line going up, like even if you use GDP as a measure of economic success, China was the only country whose GDP increased during COVID. It increased by it was increasing faster before COVID, and then it went down to 4%. I mean, 0.4% or something. But every other country's GDP went way down. So even by the standards of capitalism, socialist China is more productive.
Government took an active role in helping pump up the economy by either investing in public works or by maintaining a strong social safety net. Most of the stuff governments used to do before they sold it off for parts. This idea replaced the prevailing economic ideology of the age before, and subsequently the one that caused, the Depression, classical liberalism. Essentially, it was the idea that government should just let the market do what it'll do and keep out of the way of its ebbs and flows.
And this is all these government ideologies are so ridiculous. These anti-state ideologies, these ideas oh, we just got to get rid of the government overnight. Honestly, any kind of anarchism, but especially anarcho-capitalism, right? Because there are anarchists who just believe that the state bureaucracy got out of control in, China or the Soviet Union or whatever. But we still need to abolish class, right? You need to get rid of class distinctions because that's where you see a real dictatorship, a dictatorship of capital. They're the ones who control the government. They're the ones who control your life and decide what you do all day. And those are the ones who control society's surplus. They have the surplus of society's labor in their hands that they gain through exploiting society's labor. So the idea that you can just let those corporations stick around and get rid of the government and everything will be awesome, is absurd. Like what these anarcho-capitalists or what these neoliberals believe, classical liberals, whatever you want to call them, the people who induce shock therapy on other countries. And the imperialists who actually induce shock therapy don't believe this, right? They don't actually believe neoliberalism is the best ideology for the people. They're just trying to make as much money as they can, and they have to have an ideology to back it up, and they have to, use lies, obviously, to back up their imperialist aggression, which is a lot of what we do on this channel, is try and debunk those lies. But all these anti-state ideologies are ridiculous at their core, because, look, as this comment says, some people say that you can't survive with or without government. I mean, government is a thing that exists. The state is a thing that exists because it develops within society sort of naturally, right? There's always forms of administration, but as productive capacity within human society increases, you need some sort of a state to mediate conflicts and to do things like that. But also, you need a state to keep the laboring class in line. Right, you need a state to suppress the laboring class from rising up and taking hold of private property or the means of production. You need a state to work at the behest of the owning class. So it's something that develops as society is split into classes. So to then look at that development of society and the development of state that emerges with the development of classes and an owning class versus a working class. You look at our society today where we still have an owning class and a working class, and the state so obviously works at the behest of the owning class. How could you just say, okay, just get rid of the state then? Right? It's clearly not that simple. And that's why I like the Marxist explanation of the state so much, in that, the state has a monopoly on authority. The state has a monopoly on violence. So in order to get rid of class society, you first have to take hold of the state. And smash the ready-made state machinery and make it a true apparatus of the workers, But it's not as simple as just getting rid of it, right? You need to use that authority to then get rid of class authority. You can't just wipe out, though, the government, the state, this central form of administration and mediating conflicts and having a monopoly on authority. You can't just wipe it out overnight or decrease it and use it as little as possible and then just assume and hope and pray that the capitalists and the anarchic capitalist market system is just going to work everything out in everyone's best interest somehow magically.
And what about the people who die and suffer from those ebbs and flows?
I think it's a great idea. House sitters get somewhere to stay, and we, the house owners, get someone to look after.
So as Keynesianism became the norm of the land, conservative opponents always waited in the wings, criticizing the various successful programs for doing unspeakable atrocities like building libraries or giving people unemployment benefits. Good Lord. When a resource shock in the 1970s upset people's confidence in the economic order, these new classical liberals, or neoliberals, were ready to swoop in and seize the means of communication. And luckily for them, rich people are really into the idea that rich people should just keep being rich. And politicians, big fans of rich people. Neoliberalism's acolytes keep the faith in this system despite mountains and mountains of evidence showing that it's not much more than a dystopian nightmare. It turned a lot of mainstream economics into more akin to theology. Clerics act as capitalist missionaries trying to solve every problem with market-based solutions. Today, this is more or less the dominant ideology of much of the world.
And that's what the field of economics has become. How do we keep capitalism running without taking any power or wealth away from the capitalists and allowing them to continue increasing their wealth and continue expanding? Because capitalism always needs to grow, and capital always needs to grow and expand. So that's what economics is. You know, I'm going to be a financial planner. I'm going to be a corporate consultant, or, you know, an economist at a big company. You're just finding ways to expand capital as much as you can. You know, the planet, the ecology, the workers, everything else, you know, comes secondary.
Especially those countries that got rich off colonizing other countries. You can imagine, though, that this was the exact opposite of the Soviet Union's top-down, state-organized command economy where literally everything was a government operation in one form or another. Russia needed to move into the new paradigm because we all must worship the great invisible hand. It is hungry for the blood of untold millions. And in order to prosper, Russia must feed it with their masses, which requires a process called privatization. So the plan was to take these big public firms, like, say, a big Russian vodka manufacturing concern, and turn it into a corporation. This would mean that ownership of the company went from the state to the people by giving them stock that you can buy or sell, you know, like on a market, like a stock market. The way they decided to transition Russia into a modern capitalist country was through the economic version of shock therapy, which they deceptively call shock therapy. Essentially, shock therapy is when you approach liberalization the way I critique my own work, instantaneous and without mercy. It's essentially the process of privatization by ending all currency and price controls at once. I guess the idea is that in the long run, ripping off the Band-Aid fast is the best option. The term is best known through the work of Naomi Klein. In her 2007 book,
I mean, that's the justification they give. And he mentioned Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine, there. And that's the justification they give, is ripping it off like a Band-Aid, I guess. But really, they just want to plunder these economies, right? They were drooling over the wealth of the Soviet Union's resources and markets for years. And with shock therapy, a lot of these state-run companies were sold to Western multinationals for pennies. You know, and they just pillaged the Soviet Union. Unemployment shot up to like 20%. as people no longer had their jobs with these state-run companies, and the workforces were cut down, the social safety nets and the welfare systems that people were used to, that provided healthcare and things like that, pensions, were just ripped away. And people were really, really able to see what capitalism's all about really quick. And this is why 75% of people in Russia today, or approximately that number, prefer or wish to go back to the Soviet economic model. Because while it wasn't perfect, while they didn't create communism, while they did not have the consumerism of the West, which a lot of people sort of fell for within the former Soviet Union, wanting, more consumerism and more consumer options. Although they didn't have that, they had an economic security that you don't have under capitalism. They had always access to employment and housing and various social services that you don't have under capitalism. And yeah, that's what neoliberalism is all about. And the task going forward is, how do we develop socialism in a way that's better and improved, and that doesn't fall to the imperialists and the revisionists and the opportunists.
The shock doctrine, she makes a pretty clear case that neoliberal advocates have gotten far using this tactic. Her thesis is that neoliberalism is, in general, pretty unpopular, mostly because of the kinds of things you'll hear about in just a second, and that these waves of quick, merciless privatization come after shocks like acts of terrorism, military coups, or huge economic disasters, like all good things. Some examples of shock therapy coming on the backs of disasters for the USSR were the 1975 neoliberal reforms in Chile under Augusto Pinochet, when he suddenly Juan Guaido to the presidency through a military coup, or Poland a few years before the Soviet collapse. After the collapse, you see this in events like Hurricane Katrina, where the hurricane's destruction and chaos allowed for sweeping privatization of services in New Orleans and Louisiana at large.
And that's one of my favorite examples in the book. I have a lot of friends from Louisiana, and they can attest to this. They had to go to expensive private schools after Katrina, because a lot of the public schools were wiped out by the hurricane. And then Milton Friedman wrote an op-ed that he published, arguing that George Bush should take this opportunity to push for charter schools and privatization of the education system. They went ahead and did it, and school became segregated by income, more segregated by race. Louisiana ranks last, or as one of the last countries in the nation, in the U.S., where we don't have high education standards in general for developed countries. It's been just a disaster. Thousands of teachers lost their jobs. So that's just an example of how they take advantage of a disaster, a crisis, in order to induce privatization very quickly, similar to how they did in the Soviet Union and in a lot of Latin American countries. So yeah, I want to take a break here to answer a couple questions in the chat. Eddie, do you think modern computers are capable of solving the economic calculation problem? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Oops, I accidentally just skipped way ahead in that video. We'll just take a break from that for now. But watch our video with Paul Cockshott. I mean, he's absolutely convincing, computer scientist and Marxist for a million years. Watch this video. As Cobra Commander said, ECP is not real. Mises is one of the dumbest MFs to live. Really, literally. I've read a whole bunch of libertarian and not as much as some people, but a handful of libertarian or Austrian theory. Read about Hayek and Mises ECP. It's really, really dumb. Really dumb. You can absolutely plan an economy via computers. I mean, they've been able to since like the 1970s, but now with the level that technology's at, it'd be easy. And Cockshott explains that in our interview with him, which everyone should check out. Midwestern Marx and Paul Cockshott, yeah. Thank you very much, Tusker, for the $10 super chat. Woo, super chat. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for supporting me. I'm gonna go buy lunch with that tomorrow. You've chosen to feed me today. Just kidding. Thank you though, for real. Would you explain the difference between Western lockdown and China's zero COVID policies? I feel like the West think lockdowns equal China bad, and I don't think they're the same. Yeah, it's a good point. The policies were way different. Way different. The Western lockdown was basically just locking people out of work. Locking people out of work except for blue collar laborers, industrial workers, because they are absolutely vital for the economy. And, really the profits of Wall Street and London would stop if the industrial workers stop going to work. But that's basically what happened in the U.S. was a lot of people were locked out of the work, and then they were given, you could go on unemployment and get extra unemployment benefits and sit in your house, or you could, and then there were a few payments for young people straight from the government. But China's zero COVID policy, involved massive contact tracing efforts, massive mutual aid efforts within their community. The government would basically bring food to your door if you needed to isolate or not go to work. So there was no worry about meeting your means of subsistence, right? It wasn't like the U.S. where it's just like, yeah, you can't work and good luck feeding yourself. The government took care of people's needs, and a lot of people just keep working in some capacity, but if they were exposed to COVID, or there was a chance they had COVID, or they tested positive with the contact tracers, then they could stay home and not have to worry about putting food on the table that day. Or that week, which people are still dealing with in the U.S., getting locked out of work for COVID. So yeah, very, very different than U.S. lockdowns. Eddie, have you gone over Jason Schulman's 2020 publication for DSA about campism? Seems to me to refer to anyone that questions U.S. narratives about China, Venezuela, and Russia's espousing campism. Well, I would love to check that out. That sounds very interesting. And thank you very much for the $10 super chat. The level that I have to associate and understand DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, is increasing because I'm starting a CPUSA club, a CPUSA chapter in my area. So there's a fairly big DSA presence in my area. They're probably the biggest socialist party here. So it's just going to be like out of necessity. We're going to have to work with them, and, put organizing efforts and events together with DSA in certain ways. So yeah, but I've always been really, really critical of DSA because they support imperialism a lot. They did a lot of fun, or they did a lot of good stuff recently, like overseeing the Nicaraguan elections, I think, or something like that. They went to some country and helped out with the elections, but isn't Jason Schulman like is he connected to corporations in any way? What's the name of the article? Jason Schulman, DSA, Jason Schulman, campism, anti-campism for international working class solidarity. I mean, there is. Oops, I just closed out of some of it. There is an argument to be made against campism, I guess, in that understanding that class struggle is still going on in a lot of these countries, right? Like Venezuela isn't a perfect country. The Communist Party is still, struggling hard there, as is the Socialist Party. There's a lot of internal and external contradictions in Venezuela. They're struggling to circumvent the U.S. economic sanctions without moving towards neoliberalism. But at the same time, we should definitely support Venezuela and China and other socialist countries in their struggle against imperialism in the U.S. and countries like Iran and Russia, who are willing to help them with that and willing to be trade partners. And help these countries develop and circumnavigate U.S. blockades and whatnot. So there's also an argument to be made not for campism, but for a multipolar world. An end to U.S. imperial hegemonic domination over the globe. It was called Campus. So I found an article trying to figure out what it was just called. Oh, gotcha. Thank you for pointing this out. Left is best, and thank you very much for the super chat. Yeah, maybe I should read this a little bit here. Check it out. Oh my gosh, we have a troll in the chat. Sorry, everyone. I don't know why there aren't any mods here. I saw Scruff Capone was here. That is the biggest troll and the worst. Like, that person is obsessed with me. They've found their way into every single thing I think I've ever done in my life on the internet. And they just come in and say the dumbest stuff. What are you, on YouTube or Twitch? Where is this person? Did someone block them already? I might have them blocked. Unparalleled Dev, I'm going to make you a mod if you're not, so you can block them. There you go. You're a mod because you're always here and you're the main. You the best. Okay. Ooh, got another super chat here. Is campism a nice way of saying ultra? I don't think so. Advice on keeping hopes up with the state of the economy in the USA. What do you do when you get frustrated to focus on the future? Thank you from Texas for your work. Thank you. Well, I mean, crises, economic and political crises and downturns and, capitalism showing how it's an inefficient, anarchic system that doesn't take care of the people, that puts profits ahead of people's lives. I mean, when the economy and political system show that, it's a good time to organize people. Right now is a good time to show people that, the proxy war in Ukraine, all of our tax dollars being spent on weapons rather than helping people, the high levels of inflation, other things like this stem from capitalism. They don't stem from China controlling Joe Biden or whatever else people believe in, whatever crazy stuff people believe in. They stem from the relations of production, the capitalist relations of production, which allow, the capitalist class and the financial oligarchs to control the surplus of society that's created by society's labor. So, I would say I'm in CPUSA, starting a CPUSA chapter in my area. Especially if you're in Iowa, join CPUSA so we can work together. But I would say, if you're feeling down or no hope about the future, throw yourself into organizing as much as possible. Try and build community with the working class in your area and with the community in your area and with other organizers. And Lenin says, that Lenin and Che and all these good organizers say people are forged in the struggle, right? You sort of build your personality and become a better socialist by engaging in organizing and class struggle. And then revolutionary optimism, the ability to see the future and see the potential for socialism and communism, is a skill that comes along with organizing. And that comes with forging yourself in the struggle, so to speak. Eddie, what are your thoughts on Redneck Revolt? I've heard they're good. I don't know too much about them. Sorry, I got to text someone back. I've heard about them, but I heard they're good. Or I've never watched them, but I heard they're good. Sorry. Right on. Thank you for the perspective, Eddie. You bet. Thank you very much for the super chat. Thanks for hanging out, too. So let's check out this article a little bit. I heard Jason Schulman and Dan Labatz. Didn't the Gray Zone do a piece exposing DSA for this? And they said that these guys are like connected to weapons contractors or something. I don't want to accuse them of that if it's not true. But Gray Zone did something about DSA being connected to various corporate interests. As socialists, we must espouse a truly internationalist politics, one that supports democratic and working class movements around the world. Remember what we were just talking about in the Yanis Varoufakis video about how the word democratic or democracy in the West doesn't really mean anything? They just basically, anybody who looks like us, anyone who calls themselves a liberal democracy, is democratic. And anybody who goes any other way is not. That's what democracy and freedom mean in the U.S. Well, freedom means freedom for corporations and private investment, but we support such movements in their struggles against tyrannical governments and the ruling class of all countries. That doesn't sound very good. Just as we welcome their solidarity with us. As U.S. socialists, we oppose the imperialism of the United States, but as internationalists, we must also oppose the authoritarianism and imperialism of other states, regardless of what those who run those states call themselves. We must oppose campism. Wow, he's really using all the buzzwords here, the imperialist buzzwords. Authoritarianism, what does that mean? Describe authoritarianism. Is that when one country wields the authority of the state? Because Marxism and socialism forever has said that the working class needs to wield the state authority. So what do you mean when you say authoritarianism? That, socialist countries outside the US recognize that authority exists? And that the workers need to use authority if they ever want to combat imperialism and the counter-revolution of the capitalist class. No, I mean, for the imperialist, authoritarianism is a meaningless word. It just means our enemies. Anyone the U.S. doesn't like, they have an authoritarian government. Don't ask us to describe what it means. They abuse human rights. My username is Satire, Anarcho-Television. Thank you. Thank you very much for the super chat. And good to know. Thank you. Campism is a long-standing tendency in the international and U.S. left. It approaches world politics from the standpoint that the main axis of conflict is between two hostile geopolitical camps. The imperialist camp, today made up of the U.S., Western Europe, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, or some such combination. How could you not even mention Colombia and formerly Colombia before Gustavo Petro, and Honduras before Xiomara Castro? Two traditionally extremely right-wing countries. Hugo Chavez called Colombia the Israel of Latin America. Countries that have been loaded up with U.S. military bases and used to launch attacks at other countries, other U.S. enemy countries like Venezuela and Nicaragua, very similar to how the U.S. uses Israel and Saudi Arabia. But either way. On the other hand, the anti-imperialist camp of Russia, China, North Korea, Syria, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and other less industrialized nations on the other. I wonder where Vietnam falls in this. What do the people who accuse anti-imperialists of campism think of Vietnam, a country still, very skeptical of China and, who works with the U.S. but is still Marxist-Leninist and run by a socialist government? Either way. The anti-imperialist camp is generally defined as all formerly colonized nations, and especially all avowedly anti-imperialist governments in the global south. This ideology has been a hallmark of political currents defining themselves as ML, though others who don't identify with that term also embrace it. Campism, somewhat surprisingly, considering the organization's political lineage, now exists even within parts of DSA. We hope that even within parts of DSA, we might have Marxist-Leninists in the Socialist Party. Whatever shall we do? Let's have the weapons contractors within the party write an article denouncing them. Marxist-Leninists are in power right now because Marxism-Leninism is the ideology that actually works. Sorry to break that to you, democratic socialists. What are these people? This would be a way to check out where these people are from. What went wrong? The Nicaraguan Revolution. A Marxist analysis. What the heck? This dude is like a State Department plant. We hope that our brief account and critique of campism will convince people in DSA attracted to it, for it distorts the meaning of democratic socialism and leads socialists away from an injury to all workers of the world united as inverted nationalism. Blah, blah, blah. In this framework, the division of the world between rival geopolitical blocs overrides other questions and provides the dominant political explanation for world events. It seldom addresses the internal class character of the nations of the anti-imperialist camp, and regardless of the nature of their governments and economies, attribute to those nations a progressive character. How could you say that? We are one of these anti-imperialist channels, one of these channels that supports existing socialism the strongest. And yes, we talk about the effects of imperialism because imperialism is a global phenomenon and it's been going on for years, and it is the current stage of capitalism that we're in, an imperialist era of U.S. hegemonic dominance that's coming to an end. So we definitely need to recognize that as an important factor in geopolitics, because it is. And as Marxists, we engage with reality. But we talk about the internal factors and the internal class struggle and the class makeup of China and Venezuela, especially, but also other countries like the DPRK, all the time. All the time. That's like half of what we talk about. Because every country has external contradictions, which for the socialist countries usually result from imperialism. And they have internal contradictions. They have, a bourgeoisie and an owning class and a working class and class struggle going on within their own country. And, a construction of socialism going on within their own country, and in an attempt to overcome all of these internal contradictions. We just recently did a bunch of videos about Venezuela, discussing what the Communist Party has been saying, their conflict and butting of heads with the Socialist Party, the ruling Socialist Party, and what our position on that should be. So to say anti-imperialists and Marxist-Leninists don't, acknowledge the internal class character, that's freaking ridiculous. Almost never criticizes. Someone says, what went wrong? It succeeded. Yeah, that's what went wrong for these imperialist socialists, who infiltrated DSA, Jason Schulman and Dan Labatz. And I wish I knew more about them. But for them, being authoritarian in a country that we need to denounce means being successful. Never criticizes the anti-imperialist nations, oppose democracy and social justice, blah, blah, blah. There we go. Woke imperialism. We need to support movements for social justice within these countries, even, when they're backed by the CIA and, the NED and the various NGOs who serve U.S. finance capital, because those countries don't have the same values as us. They don't have the same woke values. They don't have all the same social policies, so therefore socialists need to support separatist movements in China. Woke imperialism. Contemporary campism, as described above, runs counter to the Marxist and broader DSA, democratic socialist tradition, insofar stresses solidarity with states rather than the working class. Tendency generally supports clearly capitalist states like Iran and Syria, or states that claim to be socialist like China or North Korea, which have authoritarian or totalitarian governments. There you go. You got to love when socialists quote words that were created and popularized by CIA-backed authors like Hannah Arendt. The Origins of Totalitarianism, a book sponsored and supported by the CIA, the Annals of the U.S. State Department, the imperialists that conflated the fascists in World War II with the communists and called it all totalitarianism, just so imperialists from the State Department infiltrating DSA years later could reuse and recycle that rhetoric to denounce clearly socialist countries like China and North Korea. In the past, socialists from Karl Marx to Eugene Debs, from Rosa Luxemburg, C.L.R. James, always emphasized that workers in each country should support those in their struggles for democracy and social justice. The idea that Karl Marx would support woke imperialism is ridiculous. Or the idea that he would go along with this idea that the Soviet Union and other socialist countries were authoritarian, right? Or they needed to be overthrown by the U.S. empire. He would have seen right through that so fast. He wanted the workers to use authority, really whatever that meant, after watching the Paris Commune and after watching the capitalist state dismantle the, workers' experiment that they had struggled for. He says that the state needs to be seized and authority needs to be used. We need a dictatorship of the proletariat, which doesn't mean dictatorship, in the traditional sense of the word, that we think of it in the West with totalitarian governments. But the workers need to seize the state and set up a true democracy, true systems and popular assemblies of worker power where workers are making the decisions and where workers can use that state to suppress the capitalist class, the owning class, the exploiting class. And, that's what these countries are doing. And Karl Marx would give it 2 thumbs up, 8 out of 10, probably, maybe 10 out of 10. I don't know. But anyways, but when it comes to states in geopolitical conflicts with the U.S., campism often support for democratic movement. Campism often opposes support for democratic movements, even ones clearly led by the working class, on the grounds that such movements jeopardize ostensibly progressive governments, and that supporting them would thus make the U.S. socialist allies of the ruling class. Obviously led by the working class, like what, the Free Tibet movement, or Free Taiwan movement, which are supported by 3% of the people in China who actually live in Tibet and Taiwan, and is mostly supported by the diaspora, meaning people who have left China and then are funded by the NED or funded by the NED before they leave China. I mean, the main pushers of a lot of these separatist movements like Free Tibet or Free Taiwan are the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, this private NGO organization set up to give direction to all the other NGOs in the imperialist NGO complex, because people were catching on to the fact that the CIA sucked and that the CIA was doing imperialism and it was connected to the U.S. government. So they said we need a private organization to do this called the NED. They fund a lot of these separatist movements and do a lot of the propaganda for these movements and try and make it look like it's coming from people on the ground. But it's coming from the imperialists themselves. For example, this typically entails support for Chinese state and the ruling Communist Party. Oh, called it, even though it promotes a highly repressive form of capitalism and opposes worker self-organization and worker power. Not true. This viewpoint distorts the Marxist political tradition. Yes, the Marxist political tradition definitely didn't call for workers to seize the government and use it to transition out of capitalism to socialism like China's doing. Very smart. They told us to just engage in electoral politics and vote for Democrats until socialism comes about magically. Roots in humanism, the Enlightenment, and 19th century workers' movement, and which is first and foremost about fighting for working class political power. What does it say? Marxist political tradition has its roots in humanism and the Enlightenment. That's not really true. It has its roots in German idealism. And Hegelianism. That's really stupid. I wish Carlos was here to see that. I mean, Marx read the Enlightenment thinkers, and he was definitely inspired by them. But this time it's made a bit of sense. Russian Revolution. However, now that socialism isn't real anymore, 21st century socialism evil. Blah, 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 blah. Lame. That article sucked. Thank you for sharing that with me, though. Luna Oy and EJ on Onkapi did a great stream on National Endowment Vietnam PBS. Oh, that'd be really interesting to watch. NED, or in layman's terms, privatized CIA. Literally. This is it. That is it. That is the NED, the privatized CIA with a whole bunch of NGOs connected to them. All right, y'all. I'm heading on out. It's been a great stream. We went an hour and a half. I'm glad I hopped on. Gonna go to bed here soon. So thanks for hanging out. Find us on Patreon at Midwestern Marx. Join our Discord server at the Midwestern Marx link tree. Like, comment, share, subscribe, boost our content in the algorithm. Follow on TikTok at MidwesternMarx.com. Spread the word about our streams. Join CPUSA, especially if you're in Iowa. Help out with my club and our CPUSA chapter. Left is best. Thanks for the quick run through. Thank you very much for the super chat. You're always sending those super chats and super stickers. Appreciate everyone who sent a super chat or super sticker. You support the stream. You are the reason that I'm able to do this while also doing grad school and work and all that and wrestling and whatnot. So thank you all very much. Same with the Patreon. If you support on Patreon, you're also the reason. So have a great weekend, homies.